Hello and welcome to another episode of the Initial NBA Show. It's your host CJ. What's up? Today we got a good episode. We're about, as of right now, about a week and a half into the NBA season. We're going to talk about the James Harden trade. That was the big news that happened over last week, right? James Harden finally making his way to the Clippers. I'll break that down from all sides. I did want to mention, you know, he had his intro press conference after I recorded this. But he said something that was super interesting. He more or less said, "I'm not a system player. I am the system." Um, After he said that, I felt really good about my opinion on how this isn't going to work for the Clippers. Because that's a very interesting thing to say for a guy that at best will be the third option. But yeah, what I break down the James Harden trade, what it means for all three teams, even the Thunder, who snaked their way into this thing again. So yeah, that's part one of this episode. Part two, early season overreactions. We're 10 days in. So obviously we have enough to know exactly how the season's gonna go. Obviously, duh. So I take a stab at some overreactions and whether I see it being, yeah, this is just an aberration. It's not going to end up this way, or well, actually, there's some things here that might make this small sample size real. So that's second part of the podcast. And I guess off to Harden stuff. All right, finally happened. James Harden's been traded. He finally got his way out of Philadelphia. He's been wanting it for what 3-4 months now. And he ended up where he wanted to go, the Clippers. So yeah, Harden finally traded. I didn't think this particular trade was actually going to happen. I thought he was going to get traded eventually, but I didn't think the Clippers would actually be the ones able to get him. But anyway, let's talk about the deal and what I like, don't like, and how I see kind of all of this playing out. So first off, the Clippers get obviously James Harden, PJ Tucker, and then Filip Petrusev. He's a rookie. I think he's already been flipped to Sacramento. So didn't last long in in LA. 76ers, they ended up getting a 2026 first round pick, and it's protected. It'll end up being the worst pick between the Thunder and the Clippers for that year. They got a 2028 first round unprotected pick from the Clippers, 2 second round picks, a 2029 pick swap with the Clippers for the first round pick. And then they got a couple kind of veteran expiring contract pieces, Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris, and then Kenyon Martin Jr. And then the Thunder, who found their way into this deal, ended up getting a 2027 pick swap with the Clippers. So I guess I know this is a James Harden trade, and the big teams in here are the Clippers and the 76ers, but I just want to talk about the Thunder role in this real quick, just because I think it's hilarious. The Thunder, they seem to always find their way into these trades and always get something out of it. And obviously they have like a million first round picks. It's well documented that they're gonna have to start, getting rid of some of those at some point. But they continue to accumulate. Essentially, the Thunder in this deal, again, I just want to mention because I think it's hilarious they're even in this deal. They don't really contribute much, and they just get something out of it for free. They upgraded on one of their first round picks. So essentially what they did is they traded away the worst of their Clippers, Rockets, Thunder first round picks in 2026. So when you think about those three teams, in all likelihood, the Thunder are going to be pretty good in 2026 given their young core. So essentially they're giving away what will in all likelihood be a pretty late first round pick. And then they get the rights to swap with the Clippers in 2027, their first round pick. So when you think about the stars on the Clippers right now, in 2027, when the Thunder get the rights to swap with the Clippers, the current Clipper stars, Harden, PG, Kawhi, Russell Westbrook, they'll all be age 36 or older. So essentially, that pick swap can end up being pretty valuable come 2027. It definitely will be better than whatever first round pick the Thunder is giving up in this in 2026. So yeah, to me, this is basically just like a small little theft by the Thunder, unless something absolutely insane and wild happens. But to me, it's truly it's incredible how Sam Presti's always getting something out of any big deal that exists. And it seems like he's doing so usually without giving up anything of value. And usually for a clear upgrade like this one is. So I just wanted to mention the Thunder rule in this. I think it's hilarious that they're even in this deal, and then the Thunder basically just got a free upgrade on a first round pick just by waiting a year. All right, now that we talked about the Thunder, let's talk about the real teams in this trade who didn't just kind of sneak their way in for a free pick upgrade. All right, the Clippers. So obviously this is the ultimate like win now move. We're going all in, if the Clippers weren't already all in. They're both trading a decent number of role players. In Batum and Covington, and to a lesser extent Martin Jr. And then I guess Marcus Morris. I don't know what his deal was. I don't know if he's been injured or not, but he hasn't played a minute this year. And they're also mortgaging more of their future. Essentially, any picks, first round picks they had left, kind of go out in this deal, or at least the ownership of those first round picks goes out. This is the ultimate win now move. You're essentially trading for a fourth superstar. I don't know if Westbrook is really considered a superstar anymore, but he was at one point. But regardless, 5 years ago, these are probably 4 of the top 15 players in the NBA, if not 4 of the top 10. So while this is an ultimate win now move, I do not like it for the Clippers at all. And this is why they're continuing to mortgage their future. And they are essentially relying on some of the most unreliable players we've pretty much ever seen. In PG and Kawhi's case, while both are amazing, they, first ballot Hall of Famers for sure. They're injured a lot more than your average player. And James Harden, again, first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's kind of quit on 3 teams at this point, and it's a trend now. Those are a couple reasons why I don't love the move. Again, and the mortgaging of the future for me is the big one, where you're essentially getting rid of any potential flexibility of rebuilding if you need to in 3 to 4 years, which, given the age of their guys, pretty likely. So another thing I'm not huge on in terms of this move, they're adding another high usage guy. So just to put that in perspective, give you some kind of statistics to say like, well, they'll work together, it'll be fine. They now have 5 of the top 60 players in usage from last year. Or I guess you go one better, 5 of the top 55 players in usage. So Paul George was 18th. Russell Westbrook was 30th. Kawhi Leonard 36th. Norman Powell was 47th, which was kind of surprising. And then James Harden 55th. So they essentially have 5 guys on their roster that are super high usage rate guys. And to give you some, perspective on what that means to have 5 of those guys, if you think about the top 60 in usage rate, on average, a team should have 2 of those guys, right? Because there's 30 teams, 2 per team. Obviously, there's going to be fluctuations, but in general, if you were to say, hey, I want to, on average, how many top 60 usage guys are on a team, it'd be 2. And then just to give you, again, to drive that home, for comparison, if we look at the 4 teams that made the conference finals last year, each of those teams had 2 to 3 players top 60 in usage rate. So look at Denver. Jokic was 34th. Murray was 46th. Miami, Butler was 50th. Hero was 51st. Adebayo was 53rd. So Miami had 3. Lakers, they had 2. LeBron was 6th. Davis was 23rd. And then Boston, they also had 2. So Tatum was 8th and Brown was 12th. And these are NBA ranks for where they are in usage rate for last year. So you talk about the Clippers, they now have 5 guys that were in the top 60 in usage rate for last year. And, we all know there's only one basketball to go around. So, I mean, obviously they're going to probably do some... I guess let's just talk about the good, and then we'll get into more of the bad, I guess, of this. The good. They got the best player in this deal, right? James Harden is easily better than Batum or Covington or anyone else that Philly received for sure. So they by far got the best player in this deal. A lot of times that means they won the deal. But again, I'm not super convinced that is the case here. Harden obviously gives them more playmaking. which you can never really have too much playmaking. So that's a good thing. And then while he's not as good as he once was, in Houston, for example, he's still a former MVP. He's still one of the best. He is one of the best offensive players of kind of this generation of players. Look at the last probably 10 to 12 years or so. Harden's one of the best offensive players we've seen in the last decade. And then at least in terms of the regular season, even in the playoffs to an extent, this will allow the Clippers to more easily kind of stagger their stars and potentially rest guys. Which again, with how injured Kawhi and Paul George have been over the last couple of years, isn't a bad thing for them. They're if all four of them are playing, I don't see any reason why they can't have at least two of PG, Kawhi, Harden, and Westbrook on the floor at all times. Honestly, if they don't have two of those guys on the floor at all times, I don't know what they're doing personally. And then obviously, when all four of them are playing, you have a lot of options to go to in terms of who's taking the big shot or whatever it is. So those are at least the good parts. It's not all bad. It's not like this is the worst deal to ever happen. But there are some good pieces to it. But then there's the drawbacks. So here's the bad. Here's what I don't like about this deal. I have concerns with any team that has more than two guys that say, "Hey, I'm the guy." This team now has four guys that have all been the guy, in quotes, right? The guy you go to at the end of games, the leader of the team, the high scorer, the guy that has the most usage, has the ball in his hands all the time. They have four players that have been that for the majority of their career. And I mean, during the regular season, it's not going to be an issue. They're going to stagger minutes. Some of these guys are going to play with bench guys. Some guys will be taking nights off. It's fine. But when it comes to the playoffs and kind of late game crunch situations, who of the four is going to take that final shot, right? Probably Kawhi, but maybe PG. Now, does that cause issues with Westbrook and Harden if they're not the guys that are the go-to guys in those crunch time situations? And then when it comes to the playoff situations, you're going to see a lot more cases where all four of those guys are on the floor at the same time. I have a little bit of concern again with any team that has more than two guys. It does work occasionally with three, like in the LeBron Miami teams where they kind of had like three superstar level guys. I just have concerns with how the ball is going to move. Who's going to be initiating the offense? Is it going to be a your turn, my turn thing that we see a lot of times in these situations? And whenever that happens, I'm like, it's just not going to work. I feel like there's a lot of cases where NBA teams will be like, hey, we just need three superstars or four superstars or whatever. And they make a move like this. And it's like, you don't need just three or four superstars. It's not the goal. You need the right superstars to make it work. And that's why it worked in Miami, because LeBron is able to play facilitator and Dwayne Wade was willing to pass up to LeBron and defer to Chris Bosh on occasion, right? So I just have concerns whenever there's a team. I have the same concern with Phoenix too, right? Whenever you have a team with too many of these alpha top dog type of guys, I feel like it isn't the healthiest basketball environment. It doesn't necessarily contribute to winning usually. More of the bad. The backcourt of Westbrook and Harden is atrocious defensively. That is horrendous, and it's going to make you want to vomit watching that. Obviously, they have Kawhi, they have PG, two very, very good defenders. But yeah, the guard defense is going to be really, really bad. I honestly don't really want to watch that side of the ball. I wonder if we can get like a league pass thing where they just show the Clippers' offensive possessions and we can skip all their defensive possessions, because that's how little I want to watch a Westbrook Harden backcourt defensively. They ended up losing two of their better defensive players in Batum and Covington, along with some of their depth. And I've already kind of talked about this, that, so far this season, Batum's averaging 18 minutes per game, Covington 23 minutes per game and has been starting. And then Kenny Martin Jr. has been playing 15 minutes a game. So they end up losing some of their depth and some of their defense. Now, I will say they got PJ Tucker as a part of this deal, so that does cancel out a little bit, but it's still a bit of a concern for me that, whenever you lose depth, and to me, you're not really upgrading what your true need was. That's usually not a great deal in my eyes. And then another thing to kind of it's been a trend with Clippers star players. Is he going to stay healthy? James Harden hasn't been an Iron Man. He hasn't been the Iron Man since leaving Houston. He's missed a bunch of games with Brooklyn. He missed games with Philly. The Clippers are gonna be in a situation where you may not see many games where all four of these guys, PG, Kawhi, Harden, Westbrook, are all playing at the same time. Just because three of the four, Westbrook being the exception, seem to be injured and in and out of the lineup very regularly over the last couple of years. So, while the perfect scenario of this whole thing is, oh my God, this is an unstoppable super team, the reality probably ends up being, hey, we saw like maybe 4 games where all 4 of these guys were playing and available, and we're engaged, right? So I guess we'll see what happens. And then the other one that I mentioned, again, this is just kind of a Harden specific thing. Ibesi's the number 3 guy with the Clippers. Kawhi is, I think, Kawhi is the number 1 there. PG is the number 2 there. I don't know how you can really argue that. Harden is probably the number 3 guy behind those guys. So my question is, how does he handle that? Again, playing more of a facilitator role than a go-to scorer that he was in Houston. And how long does kind of that honeymoon phase last? Because we saw the same thing in Philly. He went in, I think, trying to be a facilitator. I just don't think he likes that role very much, to be real. Because he had to defer to Embiid a lot. I see the same situation happening here. It would not shock me in any way where he plays out this season, gets a new contract, and by this time next year, maybe February of next season, we're hearing rumblings about Harden's pissed again. So that's the other bad thing is the Clippers are taking a risk. Because Harden has been a risk if he's on your team of just being mad now. There's a handful of guys like this in the NBA that at any moment they just decide, I'm not happy anymore, and then they force their way out. So I guess we'll see. Overall, again, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. Not super keen on watching the defensive side of the ball with Harden and Westbrook as your backcourt. But overall, I very much want to see how this plays out. There's a chance it's awesome. There's a chance this is an unstoppable force. Injuries don't happen. Everyone plays nice. They find a groove of these guys kind of sharing the ball. But I think it's much more likely that either this really doesn't move the needle much, or it becomes an absolute disaster. Regardless of what the scenario is, I am here to see it. I am in for it. In terms of where this puts them in the West, at best they're number 4. I would still Denver by far, I think, is the top dog, followed by Phoenix. I'd have the Lakers ahead of the Clippers, and I think the Clippers are kind of in that probably third tier. First tier being Denver, second tier being Phoenix and the Lakers, and then third tier would be the Clippers, the Warriors. Maybe you throw Sacramento in there. A healthy Memphis, though Memphis to start the season has had a rough time. So yeah, I don't think this really moves the Clippers much when you talk about, when you look at the Western Conference as a whole. And then, as far as the future goes, the Clippers are in a position now where if this doesn't work out and they end up needing to rebuild, they're going to be in basketball hell for the rest of this decade. They don't own any of their first round picks. They are banking on guys that are in their, approaching their mid-30s with injury histories and big contracts. So this is one of those where if this doesn't work out in the next year or two, the Clippers are in basketball hell until 2030. So yeah, that's enough about the Clippers. Like I said, I'm not into this move for them personally. Let's talk about the 76ers. I don't love the players I got back. Batum, Covington, Kenny Martin Jr. They're fine. They don't excite me. They don't move the needle. So if you're trying to contend, right? However, I do like the picks they got. So if you're trying to hedge your bets, this isn't a bad move for them. They could have done a lot worse. Look at the Washington Wizards with Bradley Beal. They could have done that. There may have been a better deal on the table in January. Right now is kind of an odd time to make any kind of deal just because teams are starting the season. We're, like as of this recording, we're about a week and a half in. This is just a weird time for a deal unless something odd, which Harden situations are always odd. So I feel like if Philly would have waited just, 2 more months maybe, send Harden home, maybe let him play, who cares? Either way, you probably end up getting a slightly better offer elsewhere. At that point, teams are either saying, hey, we're contending this year, we had a good start to the season, Pelicans maybe. But, I think there'd be more suitors and they probably could have gotten a better deal. But given the situation they're in, I totally understand them wanting to get off of Harden as soon as possible. And given, again, the situation they were in where their hand was kind of forced and just it definitely was not going to work out between the two sides, don't hate the return, especially because they kind of hedged their bets between competing now and having, something to work with in the future. All right, so let's talk about the good and bad. The good, I like the picks they got. There's a real shot the Clippers are in absolute shambles near the end of the decade. So those picks they got could be very, very high. They don't have to deal with the James Harden nonsense anymore, and it's pretty self-explanatory. That's been obviously not ideal for any franchise to deal with over the last, 3 months or whatever. So whenever you can move yourself away from one of those situations, it's always a positive. Another bonus, Tyrese Maxey is now the unquestioned lead guard in Philly. He has been awesome to start the year. He is awesome. He probably will be a first-time All-Star this year. At least he definitely started the season that way. So if you're able to clear out something that was going to impede his growth and progress, because I think he's only 22, that's a good move. So love this for Tyrese Maxey. I'm on the Tyrese Maxey for All-Star train. And getting rid of Harden was probably the biggest hurdle for him kind of developing into what he probably will end up being. This does give Philly some flexibility. Again, whenever you make trades like this, I like when you're able to get flexibility especially in a case where you're kind of forced to do something, like this one. So they got the flexibility to still compete if they want. They got some pretty useful role players. Again, they're not gonna, oh my God, they got this guy. It's nothing like that, but Covington's solid, Batum is solid. So, they have that. Also, all of the contracts they got are expiring next summer. And I guess they're able to retain all the cap space. So about 50 or 60 million is what I read. So when you talk about those contracts, even if Philly is, kind of punts on this year, obviously they're still going to make the playoffs, I think, with Maxey and Embiid, but it does kind of set them up nicely for next summer where they're going to have a lot of cap space to work with to get a third guy, whoever that ends up being. Who knows? Maybe no one shows up, but they will. They'll have a lot of flexibility to get a big fish next summer if they so choose. So, and then again, those veteran pieces they got expiring contracts, they'll help this year. Again, won't blow your mind, but Embiid, Maxey, a pretty good place to start. And then those will be pretty good role players around those two. This also does give Philly some first round picks later in the decade to kind of kickstart a rebuild if they end up having to. There's definitely a scenario here where Embiid is gone in the next couple years in Philly. It's a tough city to play in. He hasn't had much success. Hasn't made it past the second round. There definitely can be a scenario where he either asks out or Philly decides, you know what, we tried, we did the best we could, which they have. I don't think Philly has necessarily made any super terrible moves in all of this. Things are just kind of not worked out as you would hope over the last couple of years. So It does give Philly that option that if Embiid were to ask out, or Philly wanted to go ahead and hit the reset, saying, Embiid is amazing, but I don't think we can really put the right team around him. It gives them a little bit of a kickstart to a rebuild if they need to do so. In 3 or 4 years or whatever it is. So again, any move that gives a team flexibility, especially when they're essentially forced to make such a move, I'd like that for that team. Let's talk about the bad. There may have been a better deal in January if they would have just kind of held firm for a little bit. In all likelihood, the Harden situation was never going to be resolved, especially with the whole plane story that came out, about 2 days before the actual trade went down. But, Philly, again, there might have been a better deal in January when more teams are kind of on the market, kind of looking for guard help. Obviously, they gave up the best player in this deal. That's usually never a good thing. Though, to be fair, in this case, the best player they gave up in the deal wasn't contributing anything this year. So, giving up the best player is a bad, but in this case, it isn't that bad because he wasn't doing anything. And then again, this hurts their chances of competing this year. Especially if there was a shot, which I think that ship sailed before. If there was a shot, Harden came back and was productive. Philly is maybe not quite to Boston and Milwaukee, but they were definitely third in the East, I think, with a healthy and engaged James Harden. But now without James Harden, they are probably not even third. Maybe they're third, but they're definitely not above, like, head and shoulders above Cleveland or the Knicks. I don't think like they would be if Harden was engaged and productive. So those are the bad again for Philly. This improves Philly right now as of this season, just because Harden wasn't playing anyway. So they at least get some role players out of it. But it doesn't help them enough to put them in that same conversation as Boston, Milwaukee. In a perfect world, perfect scenario, I would have loved if the Harden situation would have kind of worked out in Philly. Everyone said they were sorry. Whatever needed to be done. Because I do think this Philly Harden experiment had a lot of potential to be really good. Like, they took Boston to 7 games. Was it 6 or 7 games? Regardless, I know Harden and Embiid kind of melted in the second round last year, but they were not that far away from the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, they were a bad Embiid and Harden game away from making the Eastern Conference Finals, and things kind of just worked out crappily for them. But I personally would have liked to see them run it back one more time with an improved Tyrese Maxey, and Kelly Oubre, who has been good to start the year. So yeah, to me that's a little disappointing, but I guess that's the risk you take with James Harden on your team. All right, we're about 2 weeks into the NBA season. So I think it's time for some overreactions. I got a list of a handful of things I kind of noticed over the last couple weeks or so, as we've gone through the NBA season. Like right now it's Sunday, November 5th, so we're talking about 10 to 12 days of NBA games. Let's overreact to them. First one, the Dallas Mavericks will finish as a top 3 seed in the West. As of this recording, they're 4-1. They are a top 3 seed in the West. They were undefeated up until they ran into Denver on a Friday night during the first game of the tournament. When I look at Dallas so far this year, my question is it sustainable? Going into the season, I definitely have had doubts and still have doubts about kind of how their team is built and whether it can work between Luka, Kyrie, and everything else they kind of have. If you look at their initial schedule, yeah, they lost to Denver in game number 5. But through the first 4 games, it's pretty easy schedule. They beat San Antonio, Brooklyn, Memphis, and Chicago. When you look at those teams, Chicago's a train wreck. Memphis is the worst team in the league right now, mainly due to injuries and then jaw suspension. San Antonio, super young team, still trying to figure it out, even though Wemby has looked freaking incredible at certain points. And then Brooklyn, who is okay, they're fine. So yeah, the Mavericks started 4-1, and the overreaction is, hey, they're going to finish as the top 3 seed in the West, and I say nay, they probably will not. Luka so far, he's been on a pretty crazy run. I mean, he does this a lot, but he's averaging a near triple double, 33.8 points per game, 10.4 rebounds, and 9.4 assists. So the dude's basically averaging a triple double. Again, this isn't that much out of the norm for him. It's maybe his averages are a little higher than normal, but still, he's been on a pretty nuts run. Dallas right now is number 2 in the NBA in 3-point shooting. They're shooting 41%. And if we're being honest, I'd probably expect this number to regress a little bit. Like if you're looking at last year, for example, Philly led the league in 3-point shooting at 38.7%. So I would expect here in the next couple weeks, there's probably going to be a couple down games from them from the 3-point line. It wouldn't be unexpected just because to keep a 41% clip from 3 over the course of an entire season, that would be truly insane. Then the other reason they started 4-1, there's a huge foul discrepancy between Dallas and everyone who they've played against. Dallas is averaging 8 extra free throws per game compared to their opponents. So they're doing a good job of both getting to the line, which is going to happen when your 2 best players are Kyrie and Luka. But also they've done a good job of not fouling and not sending the other team to the free throw line. Again, the teams they've played have been on the weaker side. Dallas has definitely had a good start to the season. Derek Lively has looked pretty good for a rookie. I watched that game when they were playing the Spurs, and the whole, it was all about Wemby, and then Derek Lively comes in the third quarter and tears it up for like 8 minutes or whatever. So they definitely have some good players, and I think they're playing a little better than I would have expected. But it would be an overreaction to say they're going to finish top 3 seed in the West, in my opinion, when you have Denver, Golden State, Phoenix, the Lakers, Sacramento, even Oklahoma City still out there. So early season overreaction. Dallas Mavericks will finish as a top 3 seed in the West. I would say false. All right. Next early season overreaction. The Grizzlies will miss the playoffs. As you guys have probably noticed, they started the season 0-6. They have yet to win a game as of this recording. Again, it is November 5th. So we're talking almost 2 weeks into the season. They have not won yet. It is time for Memphis to panic. They still have John Moran out for 19 more games. Steven Adams is hurt for the year. And Steven Adams, I mean, he's definitely not a star player, right? But he is a damn good role player. And it's definitely an injury that I think ended up being, it seems like it's having a much bigger impact than what everyone kind of expected. We missed a lot of the season last year, and they seemed to they were able to handle it. But man, no Steven Adams right now. They're 0-6. And part of the reason I think that the Steven Adams injury is having such a big impact is Brandon Clark is still out too. He tore his Achilles last year at the very end of the year. I think it was in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, between those 2 injuries, plus the jaw suspension for another 19 games, the Grizzlies are in a really, really bad place. They signed Bismarck Biyombo a couple days ago to obviously address the lack of front court they have. But I mean, at this point, if you're signing a guy off the street like 2 weeks into the season, he's probably not gonna make a big impact, right? There's a reason why he was unsigned at this point. Bismarck Biyombo is a fine backup player. Like that's what he's been his whole career. But he's not going to make a huge impact, I wouldn't think. And what's interesting about this Memphis piece, teams are shooting really well against them. Like teams are shooting 41.4% from 3, which is second worst in the league. And up until a couple days ago, I think they were third or actual worst in effective field goal percentage for their opponents. think about how crazy that is for Memphis, given that the last 2 Defensive Player of the Year players are on their team. So we can talk about Ja, we can talk about a bunch of different things, but this team is bad because of their defense. They're just giving up easy shots. Teams are shooting super high percentages against them. And 2 of their starters won the last 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Marcus Smart. So yeah, with John Morant being out for 19 more games, they need to turn this around now. Because if when Jaw's back and they're 5-20, like at this rate, they're going to be like 4-21, 5-20. They're going to have a horrendous record when he comes back. The Grizzlies are not going to be able to make up that ground that they lost. So yeah, they need to turn it around. They need to turn it around quick. And in all honesty, they either need to make a trade or I guess figure it out internally. I don't know what they can potentially do internally, but yeah, it's insane to me that they're 0-6, and the issue seems to be the defense. Given despite the fact they have the two most recent Defensive Player of the Year winners on their roster, and honestly, the offense is part of an issue. Is kind of the issue too, right? When Marcus Smart is one of your go-to guys, that's a scary thought. Desmond Bane is playing pretty well offensively. I think he's averaging, it was 25 points per game last I saw. But still, yeah, Grizzlies, they're 0-6. Early overreaction is they're going to miss the playoffs. I think this one might be true. I think they end up missing the playoffs because of the jaw suspension and the fact the West is loaded, that they've got quite a hole to dig out of by the time Ja comes back, if this start continues. All right, next up, overreaction. Cam Thomas is going to finish the year top 10 in scoring and average at least 27 points per game. Right now, through the first 6 games, he's averaging 26 points per game. He's tied for 12th in the NBA right now. I think this has a chance of being real. Like, by the season's end, this may not be an overreaction. He might come back down a little bit, honestly. Like, he started the season, I think, with 3 30-point games or something like that. In the last couple of games, he cooled off a little bit. But it would not surprise me if by the end of the year, this dude is averaging 25. So if you think of last year, he averaged 10.6 points per game on 44% shooting, 38% from 3, but he only played 16 minutes a game. This year, he's averaging, as of right now, 26 points per game on 48% shooting, but only 31% from 3 on 32 minutes per game. So he's essentially playing double the minutes as last year. He is shooting a little bit better than he did last year from the field, 48% versus 44. But he's also down 7% from 3. So honestly, if last year is kind of a guide, and if 38% from 3 is kind of what you're expecting out of him, honestly, I think his points per game might go up from where he's at right now. So a lot of it with him is opportunity. Last year he had some stretches where he was, scoring 30 plus consistently. He would go on like this 3-4 game run where he would be unstoppable, and then the coaching staff for the Nets would be like, "All right, you're not starting anymore," and either bring him off the bench or just like not play him the next game. So like I said, a lot of it's opportunity. He is getting the consistent minutes. He started all but the first game of the year. First game of the year, he came off the bench, scored 30, and I think the Nets were just like, "Okay, I think we probably should start Cam Thomas now." I don't think we have any more excuses. And part of the reason why I think he can actually do this, finish top 10 in scoring and average over 27-ish, just his mentality. He's a score first guy, like through and through. His assist numbers are horrendous for a 2 guard. I think he's at, what was it? I forgot to write it down. But last time I looked, it was like 1.8 assists per game, which if one of your kind of scorers is averaging 1.8 assists per game on 33 minutes played per game, that means that man is just chucking. He ain't kicking the ball out on a drive. He's not doing none of that. So honestly, the Nets aren't going to be very good. And obviously one guy just kind of getting buckets and not really involving his teammates usually isn't a recipe for success. But I'm still on board for just seeing Cam Thomas just be the flamethrower of our generation. I'm in. I'm in for this. All right. Next up, Jalen Duren will get All-Star consideration and is the second most important player to Detroit's future outside of Cade Cunningham, who is by far the most important player on Detroit. I don't know if he'll get All-Star consideration this year. There's a decent number of good centers, though, in the East. I mean, who do you have? Embiid and then Adebayo. So, maybe Jalen Duren will get some All-Star consideration. But I think him being the second most important young player to Cade, even over a guy like Asar Thompson, that might be a real thing. If you don't know, because before the season, I can't say I watched many Pistons games. If you don't know who Jalen Duren is, he was drafted 13th overall in the 2022 draft by the Hornets, and then was traded to the Knicks on draft night. Then he was traded to the Pistons with Kemba Walker for a future first before his rookie year. So essentially, the Knicks traded him as part of a Kemba salary dump to Detroit before last season started. Last year, he was second team all rookie. His numbers have basically gone up across the board since his rookie year. Right now, he's averaging 14.8 points per game, 11.6 rebounds, 1.6 blocks, 2.8 assists, and then 67% shooting, which is that's really good. I just noticed this: the Jalen Duren, the center post player for the Pistons, averaging 2.8 assists per game, which is more than Cam Thomas, who guard for the Brooklyn Nets. That's just hilarious to me. Whenever a post center is averaging more than a ball handling guard. Anyway, right now, Jalen Duren, he's 8th in the NBA in rebounding at almost 12 per game. He's 4th in the NBA in field goal percentage at 67%. He's playing decent defense, 1.6 blocks per game. He had a damn good start to the season. I guess we'll see, as the season progresses, but early on, the dude was, first 4 or 5 games, he was crushing it on the boards and offensively, shooting ridiculous percentages and just gobbling up rebounds. So, I don't know if he will get All-Star consideration. Probably, maybe a teensy whiny, a little tiny bit. But I think it's obvious he's part of the young core with Cade Cunningham, and then Jalen Duren probably being the number 2 guy. And then, Asar Thompson is pretty good too. He's had a pretty good start to his rookie year as well. All right, next up. This is the one I think I believe in the most. This next one. It's the overreaction that I think actually will happen. I think the Cam Thomas one will happen too. But this next one, this is the one that I think is no one's talked about that I've seen, but it's real. A rookie will lead the league in block shots this year. So right now, Chet Holmgren, Victor Wembanyama, and Asar Thompson, again, who we've been already kind of talked about with the Pistons, they're all top 12 right now in the NBA in blocks per game. This is 100% on the table, and I think it's going to happen. This is one that if I don't really gamble, but if I were to put fake money down, this was like a prop bet or something, a futures bet, I guess, I would take this one. Thompson, right now he's top 12 in blocks, and I think today he almost had a 5x5 game, which is insane for a rookie. I think he ended up with 4 steals, 4 blocks. Regardless, to be, the possibility of a 5x5 game as a rookie is insane. But given, his size, he probably won't finish top 10 in blocks. Even though he is a very good shot blocking wing. However, Wemby, that man, if you haven't watched him play, find when the Spurs are on ESPN. I'm sure they have been a lot so far. They will be a lot during the season. TNT, whatever. Watch that man play. This dude has an 8-foot wingspan. there are multiple instances of this guy being in the paint. A guy kicks out to the wing to the 3-point line, and he is able to recover and block a shot. He is able to block a 3-pointer when he starts from inside the paint. It is truly insane. He already has a couple of 3-block games. It seems like you really can't go into the lane against him. Again, there was one block today where I don't remember who it was. Shot a layup and he just swallowed it. They were right under the basket. He blocked it, swallowed it, grabbed it, all in one motion, and then started the break. So Wemby has a very real shot of leading the league in blocks this year. He's 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan. I don't think that's shocking. But despite it, there's plenty of guys that have a lot of size. I mean, maybe not quite the size of Wemby. But he seems to have really, he has good defensive instincts for a rookie, and that's just going to get better as the season goes on, especially with him being in San Antonio, playing under who probably is the best NBA coach to ever, coach a game, right? Popovich is amazing. So he'll get the best out of Wemby, and it would not surprise me if Wemby finishes number 1 in the NBA in blocks this year. And the other guy that I think will be in the running for this is Chet. Again, Chet Holmgren, not quite as long or tall as Wemby, but the dude is still Slenderman. Like he looks like he's just skinny, just super skinny and long. He already has a 7-block game this year. 7. Think about a 7-block game. How many 7-block games are there? There are not many times where a guy has 7 blocks in a game, and we are 6 games into what essentially is his rookie year. He already, again, like Wemby, he already has really good defensive instincts. He's going to play a lot. I think there's a real shot Chet also is in the running for leading the league in blocks per game. So those are the two that it is crazy in 1 year we end up getting, I think in a couple years' time are going to be the 2 best shot blockers in the NBA. They may already be 2 of the best shot blockers in the NBA. So that's the hot take that I think is, overreaction. I think is most likely to happen. Wemby and or Chet and puncher's chance to Asar Thompson leading the league in blocks. Last one. This one is how should I say? Controversial? Is that safe to say? It's controversial. Maybe make some fans of some teams mad at me. Maybe. I think we've already seen the peak of Trae Young, Julius Randle, and LaMelo Ball. Okay, so they are all right now, as of this moment, 3 of the 4 worst shooters in the NBA. So let me say that again. I'll give you the numbers. All 3 of these guys, Trae Young, Julius Randle, LaMelo Ball, all former All-Stars, each have 1 or 2 All-Star appearances. They're all shooting under 35% from the field and under 30% from 3. And right now, among qualified players, they are 3 of the 4 worst field goal percentages in the NBA. The other guy's Keegan Murray, but he hasn't made an All-Star team like this guy. These may be make or break years for these guys of kind of varying degrees. And if we're being honest, we're 5 to 6 games in. These are probably more than likely just a mini slump rather than any kind of real downgrade in any of these guys. But if I was to pick one of these 3 where I'm like, yeah, I think the best is behind him, I think it might be Julius Randle. Like looking at the ages, Julius Randle's already 28. Trae Young's 25 and Mel Ball's 22. They still have a lot of years ahead of them. But Julius Randle's already 28. He is averaging right now with the Knicks 13.7 points per game. And on 27% shooting, that's super gross. And then 22% from 3, that's horrendous. He's doing other things, right? He's chipping in 10.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, or almost 5.5 assists, and a steal. So, it's not that Julius Randle all of a sudden forgot to play basketball as a whole. But it seems like he is having a tough time getting the ball into the net, which sucks for Knicks fans, and I'm sorry. The other two guys, Trae Young and LaMelo Ball, obviously those are guys we would generally consider to be good shooters. So this definitely for these two are it's a slump. It's not anything real. But just to give you the numbers, Trae is averaging right now 21.7 points per game on 34.6% shooting, which is not super great. And only 28% from three. However, he is giving his team 10 and almost 10.5 assists, getting to the line, 9 free throw attempts a game, and 1.5 steals, which we all know Trae's defense is not good, but I guess if he's getting 1.5 steals, there's at least one-ish possessions he's affecting a game. So, cool, I guess. Then the other guy, LaMelo, averaging 14.6 points per game on 29.7% shooting and 27% from three. Again, those are horrendous shooting percentages. But like Trae Young, he's contributing in the assist department, 8.6 assists, 1.6 steals. Though I did notice his rebounding is down. I think last year he averaged around 5.3, something like that. Right now he's down to 3 rebounds per game, so that's not great for him. So yeah, this is an overreaction. They're not. I think they're gonna come back to normal. They're gonna have some really good nights over the next couple weeks. Get those shooting percentages up, points per games up. It'll be back to normal. But Julius Randle's the one of those 3 guys that I would just kind of keep an eye on. See what's going on here. He started his career, couldn't really shoot. Then he had like a year or two where it's like, okay, he's a pretty decent shooter. And then it seems like maybe he's regressed back to, I don't think this guy could shoot after all. But, at least he's contributing in other ways for the Knicks. So I guess it could be worse, even though I'm pretty sure the Knicks fans are not super happy. But then again, when are they ever happy? So yeah, overreactions 12 days into the season. Well, that's it for the episode. Thank you so much for listening. You guys are awesome. You the real MVPs. Next episode will come out, probably another 2 weeks or so from now. Now that the NBA season started up, I'm gonna try to get them out a little bit quicker than I have been. I'm gonna aim for every 2 weeks. Sometimes it'll be a little quicker than that, especially with something like what happened recently with the James Harden trade. Try to get a podcast episode on that quicker than maybe that 2 weeks cadence normally would be. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. You guys are awesome. You guys kick so much ass. And until then, don't forget to follow on the YouTube if you're watching, Spotify if you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Google's, all the different places. Follow, subscribe, do all the things. And then in the interim, I do tweet on Twitter as its former name was. So don't feel free to give me a follow over there. Usually I tweet out stuff that happens, reactions. Or usually just kind of complain about, someone not giving Nikola Jokic a call. So until next time, thank you for listening.